Everybody, welcome to the Midday magazine show. It's a good start. And I'm your host, Burhaan, and thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about graduate recruitment. We have got four guests with us who are either recent grads who have joined grad schemes or experienced grads in grad schemes or are just about to enter their first grad scheme. And they will be answering your questions, taking your comments, giving advice, giving tips. And we will be joining with them in a second. Let me just tell you where we are broadcasting from. We are broadcasting on 87.9 FM in the London area. You can join us on ramadanradio.org. We are live streaming on Facebook and YouTube, and you can join us in the studio either live by calling us if you wish, or texting or WhatsApping us on 077 614 60614. That's 077 614 60614. So welcome to my guests, Ayesha, Fatin, Yusuf, and Iman. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So just so everybody knows, Fatin is a graduate and working in teaching at the moment, been doing that for 1 year. Ayesha is just about to go into her first grad role. Iman has been is the senior here and has been in her graduate role of the civil service for a couple of years now, and Yusuf has been a grad for a year in his grad role in consulting. So we've got a variety of people, we've got a variety of experiences and backgrounds, and I guess I'll start off showing no favoritism. I'll start off with Yusuf and ask him about the timing of doing applications, because that's what people need to know, right? And it will differ from career to career, but generally speaking, my understanding was that you start doing applications around the kind of October, November time in the year prior to your grad role. Is that right? Or does it differ from, how does it differ across careers?
Yeah, so assalamu alaikum, everybody. So this is something that I got wrong about 2 years in a row when I started applying for internships in second year. I got it wrong in my second year, I got it wrong in my final year, and then finally I got it right in the year after I graduated. What tends to happen is uni starts and you think, okay, I should really start applying, and then you leave it until like December time when some of the deadlines have already started passing. Ideally, you want to start applying between September and November. I mean, they open up in September usually. So you should just be on it right from the beginning.
Who is they?
By they, I mean consultancies, banks, like financial services type places.
Okay. Yeah. And Fatin, what about for things like for teaching?
Yeah, well, usually it starts about September time up until June. So you do have quite a bit of time to start applying, but it really depends on what university or what sort of what university or what course or provider that you want to apply to. So sometimes they open a little bit later, but usually you have until about June, which is pretty close to when you start anyway, your course. So it's a lot of time.
And Iman, in the public sector, so you've got things like the civil service, which is a very popular grad scheme, and things like NHS as well. Is it a similar time scale? Does it depend on which one you want to go for?
Yeah, so for the civil service fast stream, that opens up in September. So with that, you really do want to get your application in quickly in September, October, because they start the assessment centres, as soon as November, and they usually go up until January. So it's a pretty quick timeline that they operate on. If, like me, you apply for a role directly, so like not via a grad scheme, then you do have a bit more flexibility. But again, I would say you still want to be applying in that kind of first term of uni or in that September to December timeframe.
So the first term of your final year?
Yeah.
Okay. And what happens then if you miss that period? Are you stuck then until the next year, or are there still opportunities in January, February, even through to the summer?
Well, if you were intending to apply for the fast stream, which is the grad scheme, then yes, you do have to wait until the following academic year. If you're applying directly, then there's still plenty of opportunity to apply all the way up until the summer.
And that's your situation, Ayesha, right? So you applied a few months ago and are starting in Charlotte in the next few weeks.
Yes, so I took a slightly different route. I was applying for a variety of different grad roles, but with the one that I'm starting, inshallah, very soon,
Yeah.
I applied a few months ago, but they actually approached me. So I was bringing a slightly different method, which is using LinkedIn and various other platforms to find opportunities and be approached and approach recruiters directly, which is, I think, slightly different to the norm. And then obviously with COVID, it's like adapting to using different outlets and then getting as many opportunities as possible through different ways.
So the message I'm hearing here is that it's not, if you're going for a particular type of scheme, you need to do your research beforehand as to when that window opens and of course when it closes. But if you miss that window, or if it's for a direct role, not for a grad scheme, you've got more flexibility throughout the year, and it could just be something that comes up anytime during the year.
And as well as other roles like direct roles, there are also always kind of spring and autumn internships and weeks that you can get involved in that would probably, off the back of that, you might get into a grad scheme anyway.
Okay.
So yeah, there are kind of
okay. Okay, that's good. That's good to know as well. And the type, I mean, we've mentioned now various types of consulting, grad roles, and you're all going into different sort of roles. One of the things which I want to just address is the variety of grad schemes which are out there. I think a lot of people do tend to default to certain companies, to certain industries and stuff. Now, I mean, I know, Yusuf, you did default to one of those industries, but there are a lot out there. There's a lot out there, aren't there? You don't have to go for the name brands.
Yeah, I've got friends who work for startups and within that same kind of industry, and they're having a better time than other friends who are in kind of big four kind of places. So, I mean, when I did my applications, I organized it by category. So I had the big firms and then I had the smaller firms, and then categorize them by industry as well.
Okay.
And one of the things I'd say is you start with the ones that you care least about. So when you're starting these applications, do the ones that are least important to you, prioritize them so that you can get the practice in.
Oh, okay. Right. So testing ground.
Yeah.
Did anybody else do that? Would you concur with Yusuf's advice there?
I mean, any interview for me is just practice for the next. So I understand where he's coming from, but in terms of teaching, it's not the same. Just you apply to 3 universities or 3 schools, and then you have to then get an interview with them, and that is really important. Every interview for that is important because it just depends on, that is what is dependent on you doing the course. So yeah, it's a bit different.
And I assume, like, for instance, for popular schemes like the civil service one, Iman, there are practice interviews, or maybe there's kind of YouTube stuff out there and people out there who have been through it, and there's quite a lot of information and research that you can probably do online, right?
Yeah, definitely. For the fast stream, I would say utilize all platforms. I mean, I found things like online forums like Reddit or even the student room really, really handy, because people share a lot of tips, even current applicants, which is really good. But I would say the stuff that gets less attention is schemes, like, which are individual to departments. So some government departments have their own grad schemes, for example, and there's a lot less information out there, I think, on those. And that's where things like LinkedIn are really, really useful. Like, I know friends who have just reached out to someone who's got a similar role in the department they're applying for.
That's a good point. So what are the platforms which are most useful? There's so many different platforms out there. Which ones did you guys find to be the ones which helped you the most, whether it's in terms of background information or identifying roles or linking with people, who can give you some advice? I mean, you mentioned LinkedIn a couple of times. What about the other social media platforms?
So, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, for me, it was slightly different because I was looking for help with applications and CV writing and adapting that to different industries. And I actually found, it's quite strange, but I actually found like Instagram and even TikTok maybe for quick tips and a variety of different and maybe more unique advice on how to adapt a CV or a cover letter. And it's quite up to date because you get people who are from the industry and who are even like in medicine or consulting, making these like little bits of information for you to just pick up and then write down, and then you know it's coming from a direct source, like someone who's in the industry. So that helped me a lot, actually.
Okay. And actually, just to stick with you, because you're the most recent grad, did you get any assistance from your uni, or did you seek any from them? And if you did, what was the response?
So in my second year, before COVID, it was great. There was a lot of help going into uni and talking to career advisors and people, and I mean, people you're friends with, lecturers, etc. But then in my third year, when COVID hit in March, it was a bit more difficult to access that information. And I think a lot of institutions were kind of adapting to providing information while you're at home through emails, etc. But I went to SOAS, and I did find SOAS really helped with sending you opportunities via email. They would send me opportunities every day in all sorts of industries. And that really helped because that's just like applying to interns here and junior roles here, and then getting a good feel for what's out there already.
Okay. Iman, you were a little while before, so it was before COVID, and a different university, LSE. So what was your experience? Did you seek any assistance from them?
Yeah, so I did seek help in my second year when I was also applying to law firms at the time. And I found the mock interviews that they offered, they were a really, really useful way to kind of gear up for what was some pretty intimidating interviews. So I would definitely recommend, using your uni career service if that's the kind of thing they offer. I mean, I've no idea if they do that during COVID times.
This period,
but, this period.
I think it probably differs, but from uni to uni, right? So I think some universities will be more helpful, more tuned in than others. I don't know. You all went to London universities. I'm going to move on to talking about the application process, the CVs, the assessment centers and stuff in a second, but just let me remind everybody that we are live streaming on Facebook and on YouTube and ramadanradio.org, 87.9 FM. If you have any questions, any comments, please do join us. The number is 077 614 60614. 077 614 60614. Please do text or WhatsApp in your questions and your comments. So, CVs. I'll give you you guys are given very good perspectives, as I'm sure you will continue to do on the grad side. From my perspective, as somebody who has recruited grads, I'll give you my perspective on CVs. Right, and then you can tell me your tips as well for the listeners and the viewers as to what has worked for you and what didn't work for you. For me, it needs to be a very clean CV. It needs to be no more than 2 pages. If you can do it on 1 page, even better. I've never read a CV, in all honesty, past 2 pages. Once I get to 2 pages, I stop concentrating, and everything else for me is just it's just stuff. And I want to know what their skills are and what they have achieved and what they can do, rather than something which is very task-based. I did this, I did that. I want to know what you achieved through doing that. And of course, the format is important. The font, etc., is very important. But for me, it should be very skills-based and experience-based rather than fact-based. I don't know if that resonates with the CVs, or your own CVs actually. Yusuf, do you want to have a crack at that?
Well, based off that, I don't think my CV is very good because I think
you've already got a job, so it's okay.
Yeah, luckily they didn't ask for my CV actually, but
oh, is that right? That's interesting. How come?
So I think part of the Big Four process is you put it all in online. So you don't have like a set CV that you send to them. You just kind of put it in their little form. This is where I worked, and this is a brief description of what I did. But I mean, it's basically the same thing. But yeah, my descriptions of each one are kind of task based rather than what I achieved through each one.
Okay, Fatin, for your CV, what worked for you? What Was there a factor in your CV you think made it more successful than your previous version? I'm sure you have versions 1 through to 20.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my CV that I had before was very much just, it was just my experiences, which were retail, and that, you know, in a way that is a good thing, because I had learned loads of skills from that, which I could use in my teaching. But when I started to change that and gain more experience within the teaching industry, and then also show exactly like you were saying, my skills, I think that is what captured a lot of eyes, because because you need the skills to be able to teach, and the transferable skills that you get from any industry is very important when you're teaching. For example, organization, responsibility, all of these is really important. So that definitely helped me with my CV for sure.
Okay, and what else do you think helps on a CV, Ayesha, for instance, non-academic side of things, you know, outside of work? Do you think that's something which people need to be enhancing?
Again, I don't have tons of experience, but I do know that those things help you during an interview process to bring that stuff up here and there to show how engaged you are with your life and wanting to gain skills and experiences in different fields. But with my CV, I just knew that I had to get rid of the summary and focus more on straight facts, what I did, when I did it, and what did I gain from that. So yeah, I would say extra skills are good, but keep that CV nice and short, for sure.
Yeah. And Iman, what's your experience in terms of, I know there's a bit of debate whether people should put their picture on their CV or not. From your perspective, how do you think that resonates with employers?
I mean, I don't think I've ever had to include a picture on a CV when applying for jobs, but I think my take on it would be that it's probably better not to. I mean, in my experience, obviously in the public sector, there is more of a shift towards, you know, blind CVs, and, you know, some of the applications I've made, you're not even allowed to put what university you went to, for example.
Can you just explain the concept of blind CVs?
Yeah, so it means you essentially erase details of any institutions that you went to. Some of them you might not even be able to indicate, you know, what gender you are, or age, that sort of thing. So the aim is to make recruitment fairer, basically.
Okay, it's to kind of eliminate kind of unconscious bias.
Exactly, and just level the playing field for all applicants.
Okay, is that something which is common amongst employers now? Did anybody else experience that, or do you all have to put your name and your date of birth and gender on your CVs, or not just CVs, but the application forms more so? I mean, the CV is your own choice, but in terms of the application forms, Fatin, did you find that?
Yeah, I did. I had to include some details, and actually I did have an application that did ask for a photo, which was a little bit strange because I'd never experienced that before. But yeah, there is still a bit of that, and I think that probably has to do with just they need to know everything about you when you go into teaching, just because of safeguarding issues and so on.
Okay, so then after the CV goes in for teaching, let's stick with that for the time being. What's the next step in the process?
Well, is this for, you know, to do to train, or to actually work for schools?
Either.
Okay.
Either or both.
Sure. So PGCE, to do a training with a university or a school ed, you do it through UCAS. So you put in all of your details, obviously, and you go through that, and you do your personal statement, and then that goes through. And after that, you do have the one-to-one interview with the university, the people who work there. And if you are applying for like schools directly, then you do need your CV, you need you need your cover letter, and you also need your DBS, you know, your fitness to teach. So there's loads of factors that.
So tell us what DBS is.
Okay, DBS is it's a disclosure barring service, so it's for them to know more about sort of, you know, your safeguarding. Are you do you have any convictions?
Okay.
And it's that's really important, and you need to have an enhanced one that basically it every year it just it refreshes, just to make sure that they know that, you know, you're safe to teach, basically, and you can be in a classroom with students.
Okay.
So every teacher does need that. Every teacher needs to disclose their health, making sure that they are healthy and they are fit to teach. So there are a lot of factors when it comes to teaching that you do need to disclose.
Okay, cool. And we'll talk about interviews in a second, but Iman, you mentioned earlier something about an assessment center. What is an assessment center and what's the purpose of it and what happens in them?
So an assessment center will usually be half a day to a full day, and it's basically an opportunity for the employers to test you on several different skills, usually within a group. So you'll be put through several exercises, like a group exercise, maybe a presentation, that sort of thing. It's just really meant to test your entire skill set, basically, in one day.
In a group environment?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, some of the tasks are in a group environment, some of them will be individual.
Okay, so I think Yusuf, you've done a couple of assessment centers as well, right?
Yeah, I've done a couple of grad ones, and then I also, for some reason, in my last job, I just took part in the assessment center for a load of assistant managers, just because they needed one more space, and to make things fair, they're like, "Do you want to take part in it?" I ended up not saying anything because I had no idea what they were talking about, but it was a good experience because it's very similar to a grad assessment center, but they notice quiet people a lot more. And I mean, they're doing grad assessment centers too. Like, you can be an introvert. I'm not a very talkative person, so assessment centers is usually my downfall. Luckily, with my current job, I skipped the assessment center and they put me straight to partner interview. I think if I'd got to assessment center, I wouldn't have got the job. But what I'd say is, yeah, they notice the quiet ones. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room. If you are quiet,
when you say they notice, you mean in a negative way? You mean they notice that you're quiet?
No, in a positive way. They don't. Just because you're quiet doesn't mean that they won't pick up on things that you've said.
Okay.
Like, you don't have to worry about, okay, I'm not a very social person.
Okay.
Because if you make one or two clever points or just like one good comment, they'll pick that up, because they'd much rather someone is quiet and doesn't say anything and then only says one good thing, rather than the loud kind of bullshit guy who wants to show that he's confident.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask that question actually, in terms of how do you balance in an assessment center scenario? It sounds a little bit gladiatorial, right? Where you're all competing with each other basically to show off. And the people who are more extroverted and louder and sort of take control, or look like they're trying to take control, they probably think they're doing really well and getting ahead. And again, from my point of view, from an employer's point of view, that's not the case, because you can spot that a mile away. And I'd agree with what you're saying. It's the ones who are more considered, who actually get not more attention, but that doesn't go unnoticed. You don't have to be a show off in an assessment center.
Not that there's anything wrong with being the loud one or taking the lead or taking charge, whatever. But when you're doing that, just make sure that there are easy things you can do to make sure that the assessor knows that you're still a team player. So if there are quiet people, bring them in, ask them, okay, what's your input? Kind of involve them, or allocate tasks, kind of thing, rather than trying to plan it all yourself and tell everyone what to do. There's ways that you can show that, okay, I'm a team player, but I'm also a leader. Like, it's good on both sides.
Okay, that's good. That's good advice. In terms of interviews, so do the interviews come before the assessment center or afterwards?
So can I say one more thing about assessment centers?
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple of tips that people have told me.
Yeah, please.
That really help because often, like, you go in quite nervous and you don't know what to do, and maybe the task is quite complicated or something like that. Firstly, what I'd say is, if you don't understand a task, it's better to ask than to be that one person in a 4-man group who just doesn't know what's going on. It's better to say, I don't get what's going on, in front of the assessors. Say, I don't know what's going on. Can someone explain it to me? So that you're actually it'll take them 2 minutes to explain it to you, and then you'll be part of the activity they've set for you. Because I've been in an assessment center where that's happened, and it's ended up where I'm just kind of like sitting there quiet while the rest of them are doing all the work, and it looks really bad. So yeah, easy. Make sure you ask if you don't understand, and little things that you can do that you can prepare in advance is things like offering to keep time, offering to write things up on the board, that kind of thing. It goes a long way, and it's just easy little like one-liners that you can use that show that you're confident that you're a team player, stuff like that.
Okay, yeah. Again, I would agree with that. From my point of view, from being on the other side of the table, the thing to bear in mind for people out there, if they're worried about assessment centres and they're nervous about them and it feels a bit intimidating, is that bear in mind that you've got to that point, right? You've been selected for an assessment centre for a reason. You've got there on merit. You're there because they want you there, and they want you to show a little bit more about what's on your CV or to enhance on your interview or whatever it might be. You're there on merit, and so you shouldn't feel that you're the outsider or being left out, because otherwise you wouldn't be there in the first place, right? So always bear that in mind. On interviews, a similar thing I'll say from my point of view first, and then I'll come back to you guys. Interviews are not tests. They're not there to trick you. They're not there to trip you up. They're there for you to give an opportunity for you to explain who you are, what you can do, what your personality is like, what you bring to the firm or to the organization or to the industry that you're applying to. You know, it's there for you to express yourself. It's really not. Some people think that, and I know there's lots of stuff out there about these sort of trick questions and these weird questions around how many golf balls can you fit in a 747 and things like that. But honestly, I don't know what kind of people ask those questions anymore. I think that's quite an old school way of interviewing. I don't think interviewers do that anymore. And if they do, I think that says more about the interviewer than the interviewee and the firm which they represent. And maybe you want to think again about joining them. But I'd be interested to hear your experiences of interviews. Ayesha, you've obviously successfully recently done an interview, having been offered a position. Why don't you tell us your experience?
Yeah, so it's quite strange because I had to do all of this in lockdown. All of my interviews have been on Zoom, which was a completely different ball game almost. All these tips that you hear about going into an interview have to like suddenly change for a different format. So for the job that I'm going to start, inshallah, I had to do 3 interviews. And because it's on Zoom and because we're so accessible now, being at home and having computers, I did all of those within a week, back to back, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Friday or something. And for me personally, I know a lot of people have different opinions, but I found it a lot easier to do it over Zoom than in person, just because you have the comfort of your own home and you feel more relaxed that you can, they're not seeing how nervous you are in person, because I think that shows a lot more than over on a camera, through a camera. But yeah, I would agree with what you said. Definitely, it needs to be a relaxed situation where you're having a conversation with that person and they're learning who you are and why you're interested in this, as opposed to you proving yourself and trying to win them over. It's not they don't want you to show off. They want you to like them, and you want them to like you. And that's what I learned from that. And building, like making jokes, laughing, like relaxing, they really like that. And especially over Zoom, it helps to be quite expressive as well, because they can't see the rest of your body. It helps to relax, like smile, laugh, and they can see that energy through the screen, hopefully. And
Fatin, I assume your interview process was pre-COVID, so was...
No, actually, it wasn't.
Oh, okay.
COVID. Yeah, I applied January, February time, and then by the time I did get interviews, it was when
lockdown
had hit.
Okay.
So it's exactly the same thing. It was online, and honestly, I really did enjoy that a lot better than if I had to go in, because like Ayesha said, you're just more relaxed. You're not focused on what you're wearing, your body language, because often when I was in interviews, I just had to like sit straight and like make sure that I look the part, whereas now that it's online, they just see the top half, and that's fine. So it was a lot easier, and it also just made you just notice or just focus more on the way that you're speaking and how you're interacting with the interviewer. So it was a lot laid back, but yeah, no, it was definitely in COVID. And with interviews with unis in particular, they do like to throw you off a little bit and talk about current affairs or something. So it's always something that I always tell people, if you are going for an interview, to kind of just look at the news, be aware of everything that's going around you, because they might just ask your opinion on something that you just did not prepare for. So yeah.
So what other preparation would you advise? Of course, you need to prepare in terms of your industry which you're going into. So for you, for teaching and the aspects of teaching, and also for around the institution which you're going to, so you should know something about their background. What other things would you advise?
So first thing is.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Just to add to that, how much research needs to be done as well? I guess I think some people maybe over research as well, and they spend days kind of doing background reading on it. Just give us an idea of what the balance should be.
I usually spend around a day doing research, or a couple of hours even, because if I do over research, then I get overwhelmed with all the information that I've just found, and then I'm not sure what to say. So when it comes to the interview, I'm like so focused on everything that I've learned that I want to say everything, and that it becomes really forced. But if you are, you just make sure that you know why you want to go into teaching. That's the main thing, because that's what they want to know. They don't want anybody to come in teaching because it's an easy job or you get holidays. They want you to express your passion for your subject, and the fact that you do want to make a change in young people's lives, and that's what teachers do. So it's expressing that passion and that love for teaching that I would recommend everybody try to do, and everything that they throughout the whole interview process is to make sure that they know that you love the subject that you are that you want to teach, and that you love the fact that you're going to be teaching. And I would also say do research on the school, but also their sort of extracurricular and their activities or their links within the community, because you can also add on to that and say that you like, for example, drama, and that you go to theatre often, and that then you could relate to the school and the fact that they have huge funding for their drama plays, etc. So knowing the school and showing your interest as well is very important. And for some interviews, they do get you to do an interview a numeracy test and literacy test. So making sure that you kind of go over your old English notes or something, just to go sort of like the grammar and the punctuation, which you don't notice that you forget. So it's really important to go over that. And also I've had an interview that asked me to write an email as if I was sending an email to a parent. I had to make sure that it was like, my grammar was great.
Okay.
I was writing in a formal way. So that was also very, very different to what I'm used to, because I've not emailed a parent, obviously. So so loads of things like that, just to prepare in terms of just your grammar, everything.
Okay. And Iman, your interview process, how many interviews did you have to go through, and what's the difference between like a first, second, third interview? Why do they have to have more than one?
I mean, I wish I knew the answer to that question. But so pre-COVID, the interview process, I think the purpose of having, so for example, you might have a phone interview, then a video interview, then an in-person interview. I think at each stage they are just looking, I think at each stage they test your knowledge of your own experiences more and more. So I think, for example, a first interview, it will literally be to just get a feel for your personality and your interest in the role. The next stage after that, they'll probe you more on your experiences and really try to draw out how they're relevant and why you think they're relevant, what skills you think you have, and what you can bring to the role. So I would definitely say that. I think Ayesha or Fatin mentioned earlier, I think the current affairs point is so important. I think no matter what industry you're applying to, whether it's law, consultancy, the civil service, any other public sector job, having that, you'll hear it tagged as commercial awareness. Just having a knowledge of what's going on in the world is just so important, even if it's just in terms of how you kind of vibe with the interviewers. Like, it's good for that small talk at the beginning, or just showing that you have an opinion. And I think a lot of people miss that because they don't think it's directly relevant to the role they're applying for.
That's very good advice. Hopefully people who are listening will take that on board. I think that I'd agree with that as well. I think when you're interviewing people, you want a rounded candidate. You don't want a robot. You don't want somebody who's just so narrow that they can't do anything else. You want them to have a broad experience. You want them to have a broad understanding of the world around them. I just go back to the various interview steps. So again, from my point of view, there are usually 3 interviews in these kind of roles. The first one is usually an HR interview. it's usually with somebody within the HR department of the organization which you are applying to, and that's usually just to make sure that you are who you say you are, that your CV stacks up, that you are available at the time which the role starts, that kind of thing. It's just like a tick box exercise, mostly. The second interview is usually with the manager who you'll probably be reporting to, or within the department that you might be joining, and that will be a technical interview. That will make sure that you have the actual skills, you have the experience, you understand the role, you can fulfill the role, etc. So that will be probably the key interview, is usually the second one with the manager grade person, at the technical interview, which will get you over the line in terms of, yes, this candidate is good enough for our firm or our industry. And then the third interview will usually be with somebody who's quite senior, either like at a director level or a partner level, or whatever it might be. And that's quite often just a double check. So usually by that stage, the decision has been made in a positive way. So if you've got through to third interview, you've probably got the role, and you're probably going to be offered the role. And that third interview is then for you to kind of mess up a little bit, so the onus is then on you to confirm everything what you said before. And a lot of the times what they're doing in these third interviews is just double checking that the manager's got it right, that there isn't anything which they missed. They're also checking for personality in both the second and in third interviews. They're checking that you're a good fit with the organization. They're, in terms of culture, in terms of attitude, etc. They want to make sure that you will fit in with their team, because that is important. That's an important aspect of it. Just going to come back to one thing which I think Fatin said. I'm going to just throw this one to Yusuf, because it may be slightly a different answer. She talked about passion, right, of going into teaching, and I think that's also true in many sort of public sector roles. That the passion side of it really comes through. Certainly in my industry, in the healthcare industry, without that passion, then you may as well not bother, because that's what people are looking for. Is it the same in consulting? Do you have to have like a passion for consulting? I get the impression that it's more to do with the technical side of things, because at the end of the day, in something like the consulting industry, you have to generate money for them, and so there's a different perspective. You're seen in a different way.
Yeah, I'm sure there are people out there who go into their grad roles who are passionate about consulting, but based on what I've seen and of my own experience, that's not really a major factor in interviews. You're not going in and be like, yeah, I really love consulting, I want to be a consultant. It's kind of just, it's a good grad scheme option that opens up lots of opportunities. That's kind of the mindset that most people go into those kind of roles. They go into that with that mindset, is this is somewhere where I can learn, and I don't really know what I want to do, but it's a good start kind of place. So when we were speaking earlier at the beginning of the show about where to apply, what I've got noted down is your grad role doesn't determine the rest of your career. You don't have to be worried that, oh no, I'm stuck in this in one grad scheme, and now this is going to be the rest of my life. Like it's whatever, 2-3 years, you get a load of skills, and by the end of that, you're more of a rounded candidate for any industry.
Yeah.
Because anywhere will train you up within whatever 2-3 weeks anyway. It doesn't really matter as long as you're relatively junior.
Yeah.
And people make career changes at the age of 50, 60. So, well, not 60, but yeah, 50-ish. I don't know. One thing that I'd say just about research for interviews that we missed quickly, if I could go back to that,
quickly,
is there are 4 aspects when it comes to consulting or financial services firms, 4 aspects that you need to research. And it's kind of like you need to expand your research for each one. So firstly, you want to do preparation for the role that you're going into. Then you want to expand and do research about the service line or the business area that you're going into. So let's say the role is whatever, accounting, and it's about the qualification that you're doing and what your day-to-day is going to be looking like. Then you want to research what audit is in that firm. Then you want to research the firm itself, and then you want to research the industry. So it's kind of like you zoom out with each aspect of your research. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We've had some questions come through. So I'm going to take those first, and we have about 10 minutes or so left. So I'm going to ask you guys to keep these answers to these questions relatively short, because I want to talk about actual grad life as well for the last 10 minutes, and what your experiences are as graduates in your role. And Ayesha can tell us about what she's hoping to experience it from her role. So the first question is directly for Fatin, which is, as a teacher, do you feel that you have to put your Islamic values in the background and try to conform with the school ethos? It's not really to do with grad recruitment, but is it part of your experience? So could you answer that?
Not really. As in, the school that I work in, they might be Church of England or a Catholic school, but I don't feel the need to conform to their values. I don't have to get involved in singing their hymns or doing the prayers, which I've got, I've worked in schools that they do that every lesson. I don't feel like I need to do that, but I do often feel that I might need to just sort of like keep myself to myself, keep my religion to myself, and make sure that I'm not, obviously I'm not spreading anything or anything, but obviously so it's no, not really.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so another question we've had through is graduates from the 2019-20 cohort have struggled more than most, leaving leaving higher education and entering a pandemic. As such, normal opportunities to get jobs experience internships are more available. So the question is, how do you bolster your CV without having much relevant experience? Okay, so sorry, I didn't read the question out very well, but basically the question is, the pandemic has restricted people's opportunity to get experiences which they put on their CV. So how do they bolster their CV without having that experience in that field which they're trying to pursue? Iman.
I don't think I have much to offer on this question, because I mean that situation did not apply to me at all.
Oh,
but true. I know my brother has had plenty of experience doing that, and okay. I know he's just, I think, as Fatin and Ayesha mentioned earlier, it really is about getting creative, about using platforms like LinkedIn and social media to reach out to people, even if it's just for really what seem to be minor roles, whether it's being an analyst in like a really small local business or things like that. But I'll leave this to the others.
Okay, maybe Ayesha's has more direct experience of this.
Yeah, so I would say it is tough, and the thing is, people know that, so employers know that, and they've known that for a year you've had a difficult time, and they want to see, from my experience, they want to see enthusiasm, and they want to see flexibility from you, and they want to see when you're applying and on your CV specifically, using language that shows that you have been actively working on your skills. So even if you have one or two experiences, using specific language to show that you've learned something from it. And then when you get to an interview stage, hopefully you will, showing that enthusiasm and showing that you're willing to learn and using your time wisely. And again, like we spoke about social affairs and political affairs and anything relevant to the time, I'd say definitely keep up to date with that, and make sure that they know that you're working hard to find employment.
And should people be enhancing their CV with kind of like online courses, online qualifications? Normally what you do, you'd go and get maybe like a part-time job or a Saturday job or something, or like Yusuf mentions, internships, summer placements, and they haven't been possible. So is that how you would redress the balance? Yeah,
I would agree with that, definitely. There are lots of free online courses and even seminars that you can attend that you learn from, and people like the European Commission, for example, I got a one-day experience with them on policy making, and I was able to put that on my CV, and it wasn't very difficult to obtain.
Okay.
And that would be good. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to just spend the last 5 minutes talking about actual grad experiences very briefly. And coming up after our show is another show, which is, if you bear with me, it is, yes, it is Fit for Ramadan, coming up at 1 p.m. With brother Jihad Shamis, and he's talking about Sunnah sports and sports as a legitimate career path. And he has a special guest today who's an archery instructor called Ahmed Karat from the Maidan Archery Club in Australia. So please do continue to listen in and tune in and listen to that show at 1 p.m. I suppose I'll go to Iman first, because you have the most experience as a grad. Tell us how it started, what your kind of first day nerves were like, and any advice from looking back over the last 2 years you'd give to a new grad as to how they should approach it.
Well, obviously the first day at any job is quite nerve-wracking, but yeah, I think entering an organization as, a junior, it will always be quite nerve-wracking, but I think the important thing to remember is that everyone knows that. I think generally you'll find that people are a lot friendlier and more welcoming than you think they will be. If I think back to my first day, I actually felt quite comfortable because I had arranged with my line manager to kind of come in and visit the office, meet the rest of my team a few weeks prior to my start date. And that really, really helped, I think, to get more of a feel for the people that I would be working with. I think grad life in general is, I don't know, I found it quite enjoyable. I think it's quite nice to be a junior in an organization. It means you still, sometimes you get mundane tasks to do, but generally speaking, I think people are quite keen to develop you, and they see you as, an opportunity to develop someone. They will usually do their best to put you forward for things, opportunities to mingle or network.
Yeah. Okay.
With other teams and departments, that sort of thing. But I think my advice to people starting grad jobs would be to prepare yourself for the culture shock. I think, to be frank, a lot of us will be entering these workplaces as ethnic minorities or religious minorities and things like that. And it's important not to overlook that. I mean, it does matter when you are different to a lot of people you're working with. Keep an open mind. People will ask some very strange questions sometimes. But, it is definitely something you will have to grapple with. And yeah, just say yes to opportunities that come your way. There is just no point sticking to your, normal day tasks, your desks. If you get an opportunity to go to socials and things like that, absolutely do it. You'll just feel a lot more comfortable, and you'll be exposed to so many different people. I think that's the main takeaway I've had from the last 2 years. Like, your social confidence grows so much because you just learn to deal with and talk to so many different people from different walks of life.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's a really good summary of life as a grad and some good advice there. And I'm just going to ask Yusuf to add to that, because you started your grad life online. And so your experience would be quite different, and you've yet to go into the office, right? So how's that been? Briefly, we got a couple of minutes.
Okay, a couple of minutes. So I'd say I've missed out on a lot of the stuff that Iman's talking about, a lot of the kind of positive, kind of bumping into people, meeting loads of different types of people, gaining that social confidence. I haven't had it at all. It's been really difficult over Zoom. I still, you try and go to every social that they organize on Zoom, where they give you whatever 10 quid on Uber Eats and everyone can kind of eat on camera.
That sounds awful.
But, yeah, I mean, most people wait till afterwards to eat anyway. But it's really difficult, and it's really difficult to get noticed as well by your seniors. It's difficult to make that kind of impression. One thing I'd say for people starting virtually is reach out and schedule 10-15 minute Zoom calls with people, just randomly. Let's say you're having a big kind of grad cohort meeting, message people privately and make a little comment about something here or there and kind of laugh at it. That was funny on the call or something. Just tiny, because everyone's in the same boat and everyone's kind of nervous, just kind of sitting there, not sure how to behave. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we can go back in the office soon and have some actual social time.
And has that been the same for you as well, Fatin? You've been did your role start during lockdown, or did you start live and then you switched to a remote?
Yeah, it was live, and then I had a bit of a couple months with it being remote, and it was a very different experience, because you just have to adapt all your teaching to online learning, which is really difficult to do if you've not had that experience before. So just getting used to all the kind of like online services, Google Classroom, etc., is one thing that you have to tackle first, and then having to adapt your teaching to online, so students aren't just constantly sitting at their laptops and just reading, just doing activities that are going to engage them, has been interesting. But it's something that I can take on even when I'm going back into schools, because that differentiation, adapting, is what I need to do anyway for students who have special educational needs or learning difficulties. So it has been a challenge, but it's been a great experience.
And although everybody's in the same boat, like Yusuf said, all the grads are in the same boat if they're all online. Do you feel that it compromises your grad experience? Do you think it compromises your ability to progress?
For teaching, it definitely, because you do need that experience within a school. You need to have that experience teaching live students, otherwise, you know, it's not really teaching properly. So it does take away from your progress and your experience, but it's just a different experience that you just have to sort of get used to. And
yeah. Okay, we have about a minute left, so very briefly, in 10-15 seconds, hopefully, Ayesha, you've got some good takeaways there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to it, and applying those tips that you guys gave, for sure.
Take advantage of the fact that we're working in a virtual world and utilize LinkedIn to create your personal brand and get noticed, because everyone's online all the time, so use LinkedIn more. That's one thing I've learned.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have about 30 seconds left, so just want to take this time to thank our guests, Ayesha, Fatin, Iman, and Yusuf, for giving their valuable experience and hints and tips on grad life, grad recruitment. Thank you very much all. Please join me again on Wednesday for the next edition of the Midday magazine, where we will be doing like a halftime review of productivity during Ramadan. Have we been productive, and how can we make sure our next 2 weeks, or the last 2 weeks, the second half of Ramadan, are a real killer when it comes to productivity. Please join me then, and until that time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.